They didn't send a postcard, not even that. Not even the smallest, cheapest thing. I checked the mailbox 3 times, as if a miracle might have gotten delayed between my porch and the corner postbox. But no, just catalogs, bills, and one flyer for a car wash I never go to. I stood there for a moment, my slippers wet from the morning dew, holding that empty silence in my chest like a paperweight. It was my birthday. 69. I wasn't expecting a parade, or cake, or even a call. Not really. But I'd baked a small lemon loaf anyway, just in case someone came by. I brewed the good tea, laid out 2 cups on the kitchen table, made sure the curtains were open, the house smelled like vanilla, and I wore the blouse Lily once said made me look like a lady who writes books. By 5 o'clock, I put the second cup back in the cabinet. By 7, I'd poured myself a glass of wine I didn't enjoy and watched the lemon loaf go stale. I left the dishes. Sat in the living room with my cardigan wrapped tight around me, flipping through a photo album just to remember what it was like when my name still meant something. It was around 8 when Delia called, my neighbor across the street. Kind woman. Chatty. She's always offering to bring me leftovers from her daughter's catering gigs. She didn't know it was my birthday. Most people didn't. But she did know something else. "Oh, I saw your Michael and Evelyn at Pascal's today," she chirped. "Big table. Looked like some kind of celebration. Thought you might be there too." I blinked. "At Pascal's?" "Mm-hmm. The fancy one with the patio. Michael had a jacket on even. And your Evelyn wore that green dress. You know, the one with the buttons up the back." I waved, but they didn't see me. She kept talking, but I stopped listening. I could picture it too clearly. Michael, my son, raising a glass. Evelyn, my daughter, laughing too loudly. Their spouses, their kids, maybe even a waiter with a sparkler jammed into a cake. Just not me. I thanked Delia and hung up soon after. I sat there, the quiet pressing in like a second skin. Not angry. Not yet. Just hollowed out. I looked around my house. The walls, the photos, the furniture I'd bought with the severance from the library job. My hands had paid for all of it. My hands and my back and my time. Michael's house. The down payment came from me. Evelyn's car, that sleek hybrid she said she needed for work. I wrote the check. Lily's summer camp. Jonah's braces. The roof repair. The deposit for the new office space Evelyn never actually opened. All of it. Quietly. Steadily. Without a fuss. I never asked for thanks. I never asked for much of anything. But a postcard? A phone call? A, "Hey, Mom, we're thinking of you"? Was that too expensive? I stood up and went to the sideboard, where I kept the little things no one ever asks about. Check stubs, receipts, notarized documents. A whole drawer full of history they'd prefer to forget. I pulled it open and stared at the folders, at the neat labels I'd made on rainy afternoons. And then, without really planning to, I whispered, "They forgot who this house belongs to." It wasn't a threat. Not yet. Just a fact. One they'd buried so deep under years of entitlement, they didn't even feel the ground shake anymore. But maybe they should. Maybe it's time they felt the floor give way a little. I closed the drawer. Slowly. Quietly. Like closing a chapter before opening the next. And I whispered again, to no one in particular. Not even a postcard. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't soothe but weighs. I sat at the dining room table the next morning, a cup of weak coffee untouched beside me, and opened the gray folder marked Family Expenses. I hadn't looked through it in over a year. There hadn't been a reason. Back then, I still believed a mother's help didn't need tracking. The papers inside were stacked neatly: receipts, printouts, copies of bank transfers. I'd labeled each one with a date and a short note. It was a habit from my years at the library, cataloging the important, the forgotten, the fragile. I started reading. March 2014, $27,500 wire transfer to Michael Hartwell. Down payment, 3BR house. I remembered how he'd cried on the phone, saying the bank wouldn't give them the rate unless he brought a bigger chunk. "Just a loan, Mom," he'd said. "I'll pay you back with interest." I never asked. October 2015, $3,600 to Evelyn Hartwell. Tuition for executive coaching course. She had big dreams of starting a consulting business. Wanted to quit her office job. She took the course. The business never opened. I paid for the course and bought her a congratulatory mug that read, "Boss Lady." She never used it. February 2017, $5,000. Private school enrollment deposit, Jonah Hartwell, my grandson. Smart boy, nervous around people. Evelyn said he needed a smaller class size. "It's just a deposit, Mom," she said. "The rest we'll handle." I ended up covering 3 years of tuition. August 2019, $12,000. Roof repair, 2485 Glenmont Drive. That's Michael's house. A storm had knocked out half the shingles. "We're short this month," he said, "but I'll Venmo you every dollar back." I nodded. No Venmos came. On and on it went. Car insurance, medical bills, a new laptop, a lawyer's retainer for Evelyn's divorce, birthday parties. I was too tired to attend, but still helped fund. There were 41 documented expenses in that folder. 41 times they came with open hands and heavy voices. Not once had they asked how I was doing, if I needed anything, if my knees still hurt in the cold, if my pension covered the rising gas bills. They assumed I was fine. They assumed I would give. And they assumed, worst of all, that I had forgotten what was mine. I opened the second folder. This one was labeled legal, property, deeds, titles, account ownerships. One by one, I reviewed them. The deed to Michael's house? In my name. I'd insisted on that. He had poor credit back then, and I said I'd co-sign, but the paperwork made me sole owner. "Just temporary," he'd promised. "We'll change it later." They never did. Evelyn's car? Purchased under my name. To get a better rate, the salesman had said. I'd paid in full. She kept the keys. I kept the liability. I flipped to the last page. My investment account, a tidy sum I'd built from selling the rental cottage my husband left me. It was meant to carry me through my later years, quietly and with dignity. A sticky note fluttered out. Evelyn's handwriting. "Can we tap into this if things get tight? Just until the new year?" I stared at it for a long time. They hadn't even asked me, just assumed. That's what this all was. Assumption built like scaffolding on my silence. My silence had been the green light, the blank check. And I'd signed it over and over because I thought love was proved by giving. I put the folders away. My hands were steady. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't confused. I wasn't wounded. I was clear. They weren't evil, just careless. And I'd allowed it. But that time was over. I walked to the window and looked out at the frostbitten lawn, the maple tree I'd planted when Michael was born. It used to be taller than the roofline. Now it was crooked, its limbs too thin, neglected, like me. I didn't need revenge. I didn't want a scene. I just wanted peace, the kind that comes when the ledger finally balances. And I was ready to collect. It was Delia again who brought me the next piece of truth without knowing it. She stopped by in the afternoon, a Tupperware in one hand, her keys jingling in the other. "Leftover cobbler," she said with a wink. "Don't let me take it back. It's got your name written all over it." I smiled, genuinely. "You're spoiling me." She waved it off. "You spoil yourself, honey. You've earned it. Besides, you might need the sugar for what I heard this morning." My stomach tightened. I leaned against the counter. "What did you hear?" Delia lowered her voice like we were two girls gossiping over boys in church. "At the hair salon, Fran said she overheard Michael talking to someone on the phone in the parking lot. Sounded serious. He was saying something about getting the house sorted before the summer. Said you'd probably agree if it was presented properly." I blinked. "My house?" "Well, that's what Fran assumed," Delia said. "You're the only one he's got who owns anything with a picket fence. And she said he sounded strategic, not warm." I thanked her, took the cobbler, and promised to return the container, even though we both knew I wouldn't. After she left, I sat down at the kitchen table, the silence crackling in the air. He was making plans. Without me. Of course he was. I thought of the time, a year ago, when he'd casually said, "Have you ever thought of downsizing, Mom? That big house must be a lot." He'd phrased it like concern, but his eyes had flicked toward the mantel, toward the key bowl, toward the hallway closet I kept locked. I'd smiled, told him I liked my space. But now it was clear. That wasn't a question. It was step one in a plan. I opened my laptop, slow, reliable thing, bought on discount 5 years ago, and pulled up the email folder where I saved all the practical conversations with Michael and Evelyn. There it was. Subject: quick question about estate stuff. From Michael Hartwell to Virginia Hartwell. Date March 12th, last year. "Hey, Mom, just wondering if you've thought about setting up a living trust or getting your affairs in order. Not that anything's wrong, God forbid. Just want to make sure we don't have to deal with messy paperwork later. Might be good to talk to someone about transferring title stuff now, while things are calm. Let me know if you want help setting that up." Help. I'd replied with a polite brush-off. He hadn't asked again, not directly. But apparently he'd kept talking. To agents, to friends, maybe even to lawyers. About my house. I clicked open another folder, one I hadn't needed in years. Estate planning. The will, written when I turned 60, sat there like a dusty photograph. Outdated. Back then, I'd divided everything equally. Michael, Evelyn, a little for the grandkids. I looked at it now and felt nothing. I stood and walked to the living room, sat on the edge of the armchair, and stared at the photo of my late husband, Will. He was grinning, squinting into the sun, holding baby Michael like he weighed nothing. He'd have seen through this. Will didn't trust charm. He trusted actions. "They're not bad people," I said aloud. "But they've started to treat me like furniture. Something useful. Silent." The silence didn't answer. But I knew what came next. I wasn't going to be their silent asset anymore. Not the shadow in the corner. Not the signature they needed on papers. If they wanted to make plans, I'd make mine too. And mine would not include being quietly erased from my own life. The bank smelled like lemon polish and air conditioning. A quiet hum filled the space. Printers, low conversation, the clack of a keyboard. I stood near the front desk, hands folded over my purse strap, waiting for someone to notice me. "Can I help you, ma'am?" a young man asked, barely 25, with an apologetic smile that said he didn't expect I'd be much trouble. "I need to speak with someone about my accounts. All of them. And I'd prefer someone senior." He blinked. "Of course. Do you have an appointment? No, but I'm prepared to wait. He hesitated, then nodded and disappeared behind a frosted glass partition. I sat in one of the firm lobby chairs and glanced around. The people who came in after me, a woman with a stroller, a suited man on Bluetooth, were ushered in quickly. 10 minutes passed, then 15. I didn't mind. Eventually, a woman in her 40s appeared. Blazer, neat bob, efficient but not cold. Mrs. Hartwell, I'm Claire. Why don't you come with me? Her office was small but tidy. She offered water. I declined. Once we sat, she opened her laptop and smiled politely. What can I assist you with today? I opened my folder, laid out 4 documents. I need to revoke 2 powers of attorney, cancel all standing automatic transfers from my personal accounts, and I'd like to start the process of creating a private trust. Claire's fingers paused above the keyboard. I see. May I ask what prompted this change? I looked at her evenly. You may. The answer is clarity. Clarity about what I've allowed for far too long. She nodded once, not a blink of surprise, not a drop of pity. I liked her for that. We moved through the details. The standing transfers. 3 to Michael, 1 to Evelyn. Monthly allowances they hadn't asked about in years. They just arrived, like sunrise. One was labeled loan support, another childcare offset. When Claire clicked cancel, I felt something small and sharp inside me loosen. The powers of attorney were next. One for Evelyn, to manage a joint investment account I'd once offered to help her learn. She hadn't logged in for months. The other was for Michael, given back when he helped me refinance the old mortgage. Claire printed the revocation forms. I signed them slowly, carefully. My hand didn't tremble. And the trust? She asked. Yes. I'd like to move a portion of my assets into a trust, designated for my granddaughter, Lily Hartwell. Sole beneficiary. Irrevocable. She tilted her head slightly. Not your children? No, I said. My children have received what I gave them. This is for someone who never asked. Claire nodded. I'll prepare the documents. We can finalize them with a notary next week. She handed me a receipt confirming the changes. I folded it into my purse. As I stood to leave, she said quietly, You're doing a brave thing. I turned back. No, I'm doing a long overdue thing. Outside, the sun had warmed the sidewalk. The world felt lighter, sharper. I walked to my car without rushing, without looking over my shoulder. No one knew yet what I'd done, but they would. Soon. The envelope arrived 2 days later, slid through the mail slot like any other piece of paper. I found it among catalogs and a coupon for a rotisserie chicken place I hadn't visited in years. The return address was from a law office uptown. My first thought was, already? Inside was a letter, neatly typed on thick paper that smelled faintly of toner. I read it once. Then again. It was from Michael's attorney, or at least someone claiming to represent his financial interests. The language was formal, but familiar. The kind of politeness that sharpens rather than softens. Dear Mrs. Hartwell, we are writing on behalf of Mr. Michael Hartwell regarding the Glenmont Drive property. As per recent discussions between Mr. Hartwell and a prospective buyer, we kindly request your consent to initiate the title transfer process. I stopped reading. Prospective buyer. He wasn't even waiting to ask anymore. There had been no call, no knock on the door, just this, a letter, sent like I was a minor speed bump on his road to equity. The Glenmont Drive house, my name on the deed, my money that bought it. And yet, in his mind, his mouth, his world, it was his? I folded the letter slowly, set it on the table beside my tea, and for a moment I didn't feel angry. I felt amazed, the audacity, the entitlement, the quiet assumption that I was a piece of furniture to be moved, a box to be checked, a relic to be managed. I stood and walked to the window. Outside, the magnolia tree was shedding its last flowers, white petals scattered across the lawn like pieces of broken china. It made me think of the last dinner we'd had together, maybe 9 months ago. Evelyn had brought a new wine. Michael had spent half the meal scrolling on his phone. No one had asked how I was, what I was reading, if I still had that pain in my shoulder when the weather changed. They'd thanked me for dinner, with their mouths, but they'd left the dishes. That night, after they left, I stood at the sink alone, my hands in soapy water, my cardigan damp from the splash. And I remember thinking, is this all I am now? A meal and a checkbook? Now I had my answer, and I intended to respond. Not with letters, not with arguments, but with actions. I picked up the phone and dialed Claire, the banker. I'd like to move forward with finalizing the trust for Lily, I told her. And I want to make a few more changes. Of course, she said, without question. Afterward, I called my lawyer, an old friend from Will's union days. We hadn't spoken in years, but when I explained what I needed, he didn't hesitate. We'll draft a formal reply to that letter, he said, and we'll remind your son's attorney exactly whose name is on the deed. Do it kindly, I said, but make it final. He laughed. I'll make it sound like scripture, Virginia. Unmistakable. When I hung up, I felt it again. Not triumph, but something steadier. Like standing on dry land after months at sea. I wasn't retaliating. I was reclaiming. They could keep their quiet dinners and their clipped smiles and their plans whispered behind closed doors. I'd keep what was mine. The call came just after lunchtime. I was rinsing out a dishcloth when the phone rang, its sharp tones slicing through the soft hum of my afternoon radio. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Then I picked it up. Mom? Michael's voice. Too cheerful. Too fast. Hello, dear. Hey, I was just checking in. How are you? Everything good? Need anything? I wiped my hands and leaned against the counter. I'm fine. Thank you. A pause. I could hear the shuffle of papers in the background. So, I think there was a mix-up, he said, chuckling. I heard from my lawyer that you got a letter about the Glenmont Drive property. I meant to call you first, honestly. Just got swamped. It's not urgent or anything, but we were thinking maybe it's time to formalize things, you know? Get the title in my name, since I've lived there for almost a decade. I see. Yeah. It's just easier that way. For taxes, for insurance, for future planning. I let the silence stretch. I imagined him sitting at his desk, tugging at his collar, trying to read the tone in my voice. I received the letter, I said finally, and I've already responded. Through my attorney. Another pause. Longer. You hired a lawyer? I reconnected with an old friend. He's helping me put things in order. Michael exhaled, sharp and short. Look, Mom, this doesn't have to be complicated. We're just trying to simplify everything. I assumed you'd want to help. And I have, I said gently. For years. Quietly. Without condition. He didn't respond. I've paid for your house, your renovations, your insurance. I've never asked for a penny back. Never even mentioned it. But that doesn't mean it's no longer mine. His voice came back harder, clipped. So what? You're holding it over me now? No, I said. I'm holding on to it. There's a difference. I could almost hear the flush rising in his neck. This isn't how families are supposed to operate, he said. We're supposed to trust each other. I nodded, even though he couldn't see. I agree. But trust goes both ways, Michael. And lately, you've been making plans without me. Plans that assumed I was either too old or too passive to notice. That's not fair, he snapped. No, I said quietly. It's not. And that's the point. For a moment, there was nothing but breathing on the line. I just don't understand, he said finally. Why now? Why all this? Because, I answered, I turned 69 last week, and not one of you remembered. He said nothing. No call, no card, no knock at the door. But you found time to meet with a realtor. Mom, we were busy. Things have been hectic. I know, I said. Busy people still remember the people who gave them everything. He sighed. This feels like punishment. It's not punishment, Michael, I said, voice soft. It's permission for you to handle your life without leaning on mine. He tried again, but his words were tangled now, defensive and bruised. I let him talk, let him trail off. Then I said what I'd been waiting to say. I'm not angry with you, but I am done being invisible and done being useful without being seen. He didn't say goodbye. Just a quiet click. I stood for a while, looking at the silent phone in my hand. Then I went back to folding the dishcloth. Evelyn showed up 2 days later, unannounced. Her car, that smooth, shining hybrid, slid into my driveway like it belonged there. She stepped out in heels too tall for a casual visit and sunglasses too dark for the overcast sky. I was sitting on the porch with a cup of mint tea and a half-finished crossword. She smiled that tight, practiced smile I hadn't seen since her last fundraiser. Mom, she called, walking up the steps. Look at you, all cozy. I thought I'd stop by. Just check in. I didn't move from my chair. Didn't expect you. I was in the area, she said, brushing imaginary lint off her sleeve. Thought maybe we could talk. She didn't sit. Just stood there, hands resting on her handbag like she was waiting for a stage cue. Go ahead, I said, sipping my tea. Well, she started, her tone light. Michael's a little upset. I mean, we're all just trying to understand what's happening. The canceled payments, the lawyer, the trust. It's sudden. I don't think it is, I replied. I think it's just been quiet, until now. She tilted her head. But why the drama? Why make things so formal? Because I needed to make things real. For myself. She sighed, like someone being asked to do the dishes at someone else's party. Mom, we've always appreciated everything you've done. You know that. No, I said. I don't. And if I did once, I've forgotten the feeling. That stopped her, briefly. Her mouth opened, then closed. She took off her sunglasses. I just don't want things to get cold between us. They already have, I said. You just got used to the temperature. She laughed, but it was brittle. Okay, I guess we're skipping the niceties. I'm 69, Evelyn. I've earned the right to skip anything I please. Her lips thinned. You're hurting your own family. I'm setting a boundary, I said calmly. There's a difference. She stepped back like I'd slapped her. We've done nothing but try to include you, support you. I looked her in the eyes. When's the last time you asked me how I was? Not what I could do, not what I could give. Just how I was. She blinked. That's not fair. It's true. You're twisting everything. No, I said softly. I'm untwisting it. She sat down at last, on the edge of the wicker bench, posture rigid. "Jonah's summer camp deposit is due next week," she said, almost whispering it. "I was going to call. I just hadn't yet. And now? I don't know," she said. Her voice was thin, like steam. "I guess now I'm asking." I looked out at the hydrangeas, blooming late this year. "You'll figure it out." Her head snapped toward me. "That's it? After all the years?" "After all the years," I said, still watching the flowers. "I've given what I had. Now I'm keeping what I've earned." Evelyn stood abruptly. "You're making a mistake." "No," I said. "I'm correcting one." She left without hugging me. I stayed on the porch until her car disappeared down the road and the sound of her tires faded into the stillness. Then I picked up my pen and finished the crossword. 7 letters, starts with R. I wrote, respect. The doorbell rang at dusk. I opened it to find Lily on the porch, wearing a backpack too large for her small shoulders and a smile too wide to be anything but genuine. "Grandma," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation, like she used to when she was 10. "Evening, sweetheart," I said. "You're a surprise." She grinned. "Surprises can be good." In the kitchen, she dropped her bag and sniffed the air. "You made snickerdoodles." "Of course. Still warm. Want one?" She took 2, just like she always did, and we sat at the table, the kitchen quiet but full. She'd always been that way. The only one who came without a reason, who didn't glance at her phone during our time, who listened and remembered. For a while, we just ate cookies and drank tea. No questions, no tension. Then she asked, "Is everything okay?" I didn't pretend. "Things are changing, and not everyone likes change." She nodded. "I figured. Mom's been twitchy. Dad's pacing. I heard them whispering about money, trusts, lawyers. It was like being in the middle of a bad TV show." "I'm sorry," I said. She shook her head. "Don't be. I know how they are. I've known for a long time." That stopped me. She broke her cookie in half, crumbs spilling onto her jeans. "I love them, but I see what they do. How they talk to you. The things they assume. I used to think that's just how families work. That we grow up and get busy and forget things. And now? Now I think you're the only one who didn't forget who you are." I looked at her. Really looked. 17 years old. Fierce and soft at once. More like me than either of her parents would admit. "I'm proud of you," I said quietly. She blushed. "Grandma, I'm just eating cookies." "No, you came. That's more than most." She smiled and looked down, brushing a crumb from the table. Then, her voice small. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. If you had all the money in the world, what would you do?" I paused. No one had asked me that before, not without strings. "I'd buy a ticket to the sea," I said slowly. "I've never seen it, you know. Never touched salt water. Will used to talk about it, but we never made it past the county line." Lily leaned forward, eyes wide. "You've never seen the ocean?" "Not once." She looked at me like I'd confessed a secret crime. "Then that's what we'll do. Someday." I smiled. "Someday?" "When I get my driver's license," she said seriously. "I'll save up for gas, we'll pack snacks, and we'll go." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. There was something caught in my throat that felt older than memory. She reached across the table and took my hand. "I want to see it with you. First time, both of us." In that moment, I didn't care about canceled checks or unsigned deeds. I didn't care about silence or shame or letters from lawyers. All I cared about was the hand in mine, warm and sure, and the promise in her voice that said I hadn't been forgotten, not by everyone. Maybe love, real love, doesn't ask. It notices. And it stays. The storm didn't come with rain. It came with voicemail. First one, then 3, then 7, back to back, each one tighter than the last. Michael, Evelyn, even Evelyn's husband, who never once called me in 10 years without a holiday involved. By the end of the day, my phone looked like a switchboard. Missed calls, unread messages, one email titled, all in caps, "Please call me now, urgent." I didn't. Instead, I turned off the phone and made lentil soup. Chopped carrots. Let the broth simmer. Lit the little candle on the windowsill that Lily made for me in 2nd grade. It smelled like lavender and childhood. I let the silence settle around me like a quilt. It wasn't until morning that the knock came. Loud, fast, impatient. I didn't rush. I dried my hands, adjusted my cardigan, and opened the door. Michael stood there, jaw tight, wearing a dress shirt he hadn't bothered to tuck in. "We need to talk." "Good morning to you, too," he exhaled. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. He didn't sit. Just stood in the middle of the living room, pacing slightly, like he wasn't sure which foot to put his weight on. "Everything's unraveling," he said. "Do you even understand what you've done?" I raised an eyebrow. "Enlighten me." "The house payments didn't go through. The tax transfer bounced. The trust—" He stopped himself. "You've frozen everything." "No," I said calmly. "I've reclaimed everything." He stared at me. "This isn't just about the birthday, is it?" "No, Michael. This is about the decade before it." He ran a hand through his hair. "So that's it? You just cut us off? Me, Evelyn, the kids?" "I haven't cut off anyone," I said. "I've simply removed myself as the automatic solution to every problem." He laughed bitterly. "Unbelievable. We're your children." "And I've been your mother," I replied. "In every way that counts. But I didn't sign up to be your contingency plan." "This is about power," he snapped. "You want to control us." "No," I said softly. "I want to stop being controlled." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Behind the frustration in his eyes, I saw something else. Panic. Real, rising panic. "You have no idea what kind of trouble you've started," he said finally. "Evelyn's furious. Jonah's tuition is no longer my responsibility," I said. "Neither is your mortgage, or your car, or Evelyn's office space that doesn't exist." His face darkened. "I'm not punishing you, Michael. I'm freeing you to be exactly who you say you are, self-made, independent, capable." He clenched his fists. "This is going to ruin us." "No," I said. "This is going to reveal you." He looked at me then, really looked, and for a moment I wondered if he saw me clearly for the first time in years. Not just as a quiet shadow with a checkbook, but as a woman, as his mother, as someone who'd carried, fed, protected, and paid. He didn't say thank you. Of course he didn't. Instead, he turned and walked out the door. I closed it behind him, locked it, and sat down at the kitchen table, still warm from morning light. My hands weren't shaking, not anymore. It was the young man from the county who knocked this time. Soft knock. Clipboard in hand. Nervous smile. Polite to a fault. "Mrs. Hartwell?" "Yes." "Hi, I'm Jeremy. I work with the Adult Services Liaison Office. We received a call from a family member. They expressed concern about your well-being, said you might be having trouble managing your household or making sound financial decisions." I stared at him. He adjusted his badge, eyes flicking everywhere but my face. I'm required to follow up on all reports. Would it be all right if we talked inside? I opened the door wider. Sure, come on in. Would you like tea? He looked surprised. Yes, actually. That'd be nice. We sat in the kitchen, him stiff in the chair, me pouring chamomile into cups, with a steadiness I hoped he noticed. I set the tea in front of him and waited. He cleared his throat. So, this is routine. You understand. We just want to make sure everything's okay. Of course, I said. Ask what you need to. He flipped open a form. There's mention of recent financial changes, cutting off family support, redirecting funds, contacting lawyers. Is that accurate? Every word. He blinked. And were those decisions made independently? Yes. No coercion? None. No cognitive concerns, confusion, forgetfulness, impulse control? I smiled. You mean, am I old enough to be crazy but not too crazy to notice? He went red. I didn't mean... I'm teasing, Jeremy. I know the drill. My memory's sharp. My mind is sound. And the only impulsive thing I've done this month is buy the good honey at the farmer's market. He relaxed slightly, gave a sheepish nod. It's just rare. Cases like this. I imagine it is, I said. Most mothers don't stop. We're trained to give even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. He looked at me, younger than Michael, probably not much older than Lily. Can I ask why you stopped? I considered. My children forgot that love isn't a transaction, I said. They saw my care as currency, my silence as permission. They built their lives with my hands, and when they were done, they tried to cut those hands off the deed. He said nothing, just sipped his tea. I didn't stop loving them, I continued, but I stopped giving them the tools to forget me. That's all. He nodded slowly. That's fair. Also, I added, I have a trust attorney and a financial advisor. If anyone in your office would like to speak to them, I'd be delighted to make an introduction. He smiled then, genuinely. I think we're good. As he packed up, I asked, Did Evelyn send you, or Michael? He hesitated. I'm not supposed to say, but yes. Thank you for telling me. He stood in the doorway for a moment, hand on the knob. Mrs. Hartwell? Yes. I hope if my mom ever has to make hard choices, she's as clear as you. I watched him walk down the path and disappear into a small gray sedan. When the door clicked shut, I didn't feel shaken. I felt confirmed. They hadn't just tried to control the money. They'd tried to erase my mind. That told me everything I needed to know, and it told me what was coming next. Delia came by with a cherry pie and a look that said she knew everything before I even opened the door. I brought the real stuff today, she said, brushing past me into the kitchen. None of that sugar-free nonsense. We need sugar for what I just heard. I followed her in, wordless. She already had plates out by the time I caught up. She served 2 generous slices, set the kettle on, and then leaned on the counter like she was preparing for battle. They're talking about a guardianship, she said. Michael, Evelyn, the whole damn flock. I heard it from Janice, who heard it from someone at City Hall. They're trying to claim you're unfit to manage your affairs. My fork paused midair. It won't work, she added quickly. Everyone in town knows you're sharper than most people with college degrees, but they're trying. They've already spoken to someone about getting you evaluated. The pie tasted like dust. Do they really think I won't fight it? I asked quietly. Delia snorted. They think you're tired, that you'll give up before it gets loud. I set my fork down. Then they've forgotten who raised them. She smiled, proud and sad all at once. That's the spirit I've been waiting to see. Later that day, I sat down with every document I'd ever kept: title deeds, medical reports, letters from my doctor, the notarized revocation of those power of attorney forms. I stacked them into neat piles, labeled each one. If they wanted a war, they'd get a wall first. That evening, Lily came by. She could tell something was off the moment she walked in. "Grandma?" she asked, dropping her bag. "What's going on?" "They're trying to take me to court," I said, "to have me declared mentally unfit." Her face paled. "No, no way. They're calling it protective custody." "Protective of what? Their access to your bank account?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Lily sat across from me, her fists clenched. "Tell me what to do." "You don't have to do anything," I said. "But if you ever need to testify about my memory, I hope you'll remember the day we made snickerdoodles and you told me about the sea." She nodded. "I'll remember everything." I smiled. After she left, I sat at the kitchen table and reread a letter Will had written me once, tucked between 2 pages of a gardening book. His handwriting was shaky even then. "Ginny," he wrote, "don't ever let people take you for weak just because you're quiet. You are the foundation of this family, and if the house forgets the ground it stands on, let it fall." That night, I slept with the letter under my pillow. I wasn't scared. I was ready. Let them file what they wanted. Let them talk. They would finally learn that quiet wasn't the same as powerless, and that kindness, true kindness, doesn't make you small. It makes you the one they'll never see coming. Claire called me first thing in the morning. Her voice was calm, as always, but I could hear the undercurrent of urgency. "Mrs. Hartwell, I've just been notified by our legal liaison that someone from your family attempted to access restricted information regarding your accounts. They didn't succeed, but I thought you should know." "Michael?" I asked, though I didn't need to. Claire sighed softly. "He introduced himself as your financial proxy. Said there must have been some mistake. Our team, of course, didn't release anything, but we're tightening the permissions." "Thank you," I said, "for keeping your eyes open." She hesitated. "Would you like us to assign a private flag to your file? It limits internal access, even within the bank." "Yes," I said. "That would be wise." As I ended the call, something settled in my chest. Not fear, not anger. Just clarity. Their desperation was growing. They were reaching, scrambling, testing for cracks in the armor I had spent weeks rebuilding. I pulled out the folder marked Lily in bold block letters, handwritten with a black marker I hadn't touched since Will passed. Inside were the updated documents. The trust was active. The account funded. The terms airtight. Everything I had left, everything I chose to give, it was hers now, not Evelyn's, not Michael's, not anyone's who thought of me as an expired investment. I made one final call to my attorney. "I'm ready," I said. "Let's sign." Francis Whitby was as punctual as ever. He arrived on my porch just before noon, briefcase in hand, tie slightly askew from the wind. "I had a feeling you'd make it official today," he said as I let him in. "Your son's lawyer has already called twice this morning. They want a meeting, desperately." "I bet they do," I said, setting out 2 cups of coffee. "But I'm not interested in negotiations." Francis smiled. "Good, because everything's in place. Once you sign here," he tapped the first document, "the trust becomes irrevocable. Lily will have full access when she turns 25, and limited access for education and living expenses until then. You retain control until your death, unless otherwise stipulated." I nodded. He slid the rest of the forms across the table. Power of medical attorney, revoked from Evelyn. Financial authorization, permanently closed. House deed, clarified, reaffirmed in my name with clear directives in my will. And the will itself, a clean page, a new story. I signed everything, no hesitation. After he left, I called Lily. She answered on the first ring. "Grandma?" "I did it," I said. "It's done. The trust is set up. Everything is clear now. It's all yours. One day." She didn't speak at first. Then, her voice trembling, she whispered, "Why me?" "Because," I said, "you never asked, and because you saw me." I heard her crying softly. "I'll take care of it. I promise. I'll take care of you." "I know you will," I said. "But that's not the promise I need." "What do you need then?" "Take care of yourself," I said. "Don't let anyone treat you like a convenience. And when you're older, remember that love without respect is just dependence in disguise." That evening, the house felt different. Not larger, not emptier, just mine. For the first time in years, I set the dining table for one and made my favorite meal: roasted squash, buttered rice, and a glass of white wine. Not to host, not to serve, but to enjoy. My phone buzzed 3 times during dinner. Michael, Evelyn, an unknown number. I let them buzz. The pie from Delia was still in the fridge. I cut a slice and brought it out to the porch, where the sun was sinking behind the oaks, casting gold across the grass. I took a bite. It tasted like certainty and freedom. They came together this time, Michael and Evelyn, like they'd rehearsed the visit. Synchronized silence, matching coats, faces carefully composed. No shouting, no accusations. Just a quiet storm packed into tailored jackets and clipped sentences. I heard the car before I saw it. Watched them step out through the front window, take the walkway with the weight of a funeral procession. I didn't move to greet them. I waited at the kitchen table, my hands folded, the documents tucked neatly beside me like armor. They didn't knock, just opened the door, like they still believed they had the right. "Mom," Evelyn said first, her voice brittle. "Virginia," Michael followed, dropping the formality he hadn't used since high school. I looked at both of them. "Tea?" "No," Michael said. "This isn't social." I nodded. "That's a shame. I made fresh." They didn't sit. They stood at the edge of the kitchen like guests who weren't sure if they were welcome. I let the silence stretch. Michael broke first. "We need to talk about the trust." "There's nothing to discuss," I said. "It's done." He paced. Evelyn stayed frozen. "You didn't even tell us," he said. "You moved assets. You changed the will. You've given everything to Lily." "Not everything," I said. "I kept what I need, and I gave what I wanted. But she's a child. She's 17. She doesn't know what to do with money. She's not your concern." Evelyn finally spoke, her voice tight, flat. "You're punishing us." "No," I said. "I'm protecting myself and my peace. That's not the same." "You've humiliated us," Michael snapped. "People are talking." "Then perhaps you should have behaved better." He stepped forward, towering over me. Not in height, but in presence, in pressure. "We took care of you," he said. "We tried." "You used me," I said softly. "Not always out of malice, but consistently, quietly, until my generosity became your entitlement." Evelyn's arms folded across her chest. "And you never said a word." "I did," I said. "Many times. You weren't listening." and I grew tired of repeating myself to people who only heard their own needs. Michael's face twisted. "You're bitter." "No," I said. "I'm awake." Evelyn's voice sharpened. "Do you really want to die alone in this house?" "I'd rather die alone in peace than surrounded by people who see me as an obstacle." She looked away. Michael's tone changed. "You're not thinking clearly. You've made this decision out of emotion. That's dangerous." I stood slowly, and they both stepped back. Not out of fear, but reflex, as if they'd expected I would stay seated, small, manageable. I didn't raise my voice. "Let me be clear," I said. "You will not bully me in my own home. You will not dictate what I do with what I've built. And you will not speak to me as if I've lost my mind just because I've stopped saying yes." Evelyn looked stricken. Michael, defeated. "I suggest," I continued, "that if you want to remain in my life, you start treating me like a person. Not a bank, not a burden, not a formality. A person. With boundaries, with dignity." Silence. Then, quietly, Evelyn asked, "So that's it?" "No," I said. "That's the beginning." Michael turned toward the door. "You're going to regret this." "I doubt it." They left without another word. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just sat back down at the kitchen table, poured myself another cup of tea, and watched the light spill across the floor. They'd finally seen me. Not the version they'd built in their minds, but me. And whether they liked it or not, that woman wasn't leaving. Morning came with a thin veil of fog hanging over the lawn, soft and quiet, like a blessing. The kind of morning that invites stillness, not loneliness. I sat on the porch with my tea, a blanket around my shoulders, watching the world slowly become visible again. No calls, no knocks, just birdsong and the occasional creak of the wooden steps beneath my chair. I didn't miss the noise. Not anymore. Around 9, my phone buzzed once. A text from Lily. "Can we go to the bookstore today? I want to get you something." I smiled. "Of course, sweetheart. Let's." She arrived half an hour later, hair pulled up messily, face flushed from the autumn wind. She wore a denim jacket that had once been Evelyn's. I recognized the missing button, and carried a canvas tote covered in pins. "Hi," she said, grinning. "You look warm." "I am," I said. "And you look like you have opinions about poetry." She laughed. "Maybe I do." We drove with the windows cracked just enough to smell the air. Wood smoke, leaves, something faintly citrus from her perfume. She sang softly to the radio, and I let her voice fill the space where worry used to live. At the bookstore, she led me through every aisle. Picked up books and read me the first lines. Asked which covers I liked best. Pointed out titles she thought sounded like you. We left with 2 novels, 1 cookbook, and a used map of the Atlantic coast. "This," she said, holding up the map, "is for planning." "Planning what?" She gave me a look. "You know what?" Afterward, we stopped for soup and bread. She ordered tomato basil for me without asking, and it made me want to cry. "How do you know I still like that?" "You always get it when it's gray outside." That was all. No fanfare, no performance, just quiet attention. A kind of love that noticed without needing thanks. We sat by the window, dipping bread into our bowls, letting the warmth of the meal and each other settle in. She looked at me suddenly, serious. "Do you think they'll ever get it? Mom and Uncle Mike?" I took a moment. "Maybe," I said. "When something happens that forces them to. Or maybe never. Some people confuse access with affection. They think having a key to your house means they understand your heart." She nodded. That's sad. It is, but it's not mine to fix. She stirred her soup. I want to be better. You already are, I said. Back at home, she helped me carry the books inside, then lingered by the doorway. Do you think, she asked, we could go to the sea? Soon? Even just for a weekend? I looked at her. Her eyes were steady. Hopeful. I think, I said, we'll go when the wind feels right, and we'll stand at the edge and let the salt undo everything heavy. She grinned. Promise? Yes, I said, and I don't break promises anymore. After she left, I sat in the living room and looked at the books on the table. The map. The tiny receipt with her name on it. She'd paid for everything herself. I thought of the years behind me, the ones that tried to empty me, the ones I survived anyway, and I knew, with a quiet certainty, I hadn't lost a family. I'd found the part of it that remembered how to stay. I waited a full week before opening the last envelope. It had arrived days ago, thick, heavy, hand-delivered by a courier who wore a suit too expensive for his age. It sat on my desk, unopened, like a test I didn't need to pass. I dusted around it, watered my violets, read an entire novel. I knew what was inside. Legal threat, petition for guardianship, final effort. This morning, with the November light falling across my floorboards like honey, I opened it. Just as I expected, a formal filing from Michael and Evelyn, naming themselves as concerned parties. A few paragraphs about cognitive decline, a handful of fabricated anecdotes. I had once left the stove on, they claimed. I had forgotten a doctor's appointment. I hadn't. I had displayed increasing paranoia around finances. I laughed, quietly, and then I filed it under pending for the shredder. I didn't need to fight in court, because Francis already had submitted the notarized evaluation from my doctor, the documentation from the bank, and the time-stamped video of me signing the trust. They had no case. Still, they had tried. I suppose when you build a ladder out of someone else's silence, it's a shock when the ground pulls away. That afternoon, I took Lily for a drive. We didn't tell anyone. We just got in the car, her hair up in a messy braid, her playlist humming low through the speakers. The map she'd bought sat folded between us like a promise. We drove south until the air warmed slightly, until the trees turned thinner and the smell of pine gave way to brine. And then, just before sunset, we reached it. The sea. I had imagined it 100 times, 1,000, but nothing prepared me for the sound, the breath of it, the pull. It was like standing at the edge of something ancient and being welcomed like it had been waiting just for you. Lily took my hand, and we stepped into the sand together. I rolled up my trousers, took off my shoes. The water was cold, wild, perfect. We stood ankle deep, the tide licking at our feet, the wind in our faces. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. For the first time in decades, I felt fully inside my own life. Not watching, not waiting, living. That night, in a small motel with salty sheets and a humming heater, Lily fell asleep with a paperback still open on her chest. I sat by the window, looking out toward the dark horizon, and thought about everything I'd let go of. Their voices, their judgments, their disappointment that I no longer served a purpose in their narrative. Let them spin their stories. Let them call it betrayal or bitterness. I knew what it was. It was return. Return to self. Return to peace. Return to the woman I had been before giving wore her down to a silhouette. And maybe that's all we're really meant to do at the end. Not punish, not explain, but return. In the morning, I wrote 2 letters. One to the court, declining the mediation hearing with dignity and finality. The other to myself, dated 10 years ahead. If you're still here, still breathing, still standing, you did it. You remembered who you are. You kept your name. And if you've read this far, maybe this story isn't just mine. Maybe you know what it feels like to be useful, but not seen. Generous, but unthanked. Strong, but mistaken for weak. Let me say this to you plainly from one woman to another. You're allowed to keep what's yours. You're allowed to speak up when it costs you. And you're allowed to live the rest of your life as though you matter. Not because someone else said so, but because you finally remembered it's true. If this story touched you, share it. Leave a comment. Tell someone you love that you're done being small. Let's not disappear quietly. Not anymore.